My name is Martin Roux. I'm a cinematographer and one of the creators of Diachromy and Diaphony, distributed by HAL Picture. In this video, I will show you some of the look presets of Diachromy. This is a second overview of the looks of Diachromy. And let's start with 4 new presets. Like on the first video, I've got a timeline with a large number of shots at my disposal. That timeline is still color managed in ACs, as you can see here. And I'm going to put the look in timeline so we can see the effects on all the clip of the timeline. The first look we're going to see is called Modern Film Look. Let me apply it. Unlike the Vision 3 look, Modern Film Look is a generic film look that borrows some stuff from Kodak universe, but without being like accurate and precisely sticking to the Vision 3 aesthetic. One particular feature is that, as you can see on that chart, the red become more orange and the yellows are also more orange, but without matching the Vision 3. This results in a very photogenic skin tones, as you can see on this one, for example, or this one, still very photogenic, with a nice color separation, just like Kodak, but the saturation are less pronounced than with the Kodak emulsion. In fact, Vision 3 often appears like surprisingly saturated to many people. If I switch to Vision 3 like that, you can see the colors are like very vivid, in fact. So Modern Film Look is like much more muted in terms of saturation, because we often prefer slightly faded color to exaggerate, in a way, the characteristic saturation of film, like the compressed saturation. So Modern Film Look has slightly more desaturated color with an overall hue in the midtone that is a little bit greener, which corresponds somewhat to a contemporary representation of film. Not necessarily faithful, but quite pleasing. There's also a very high compression of highlights that we are very happy to apply to a digital camera. You can see that on those exteriors. And I can show you the curve, which is in fact even more compressed than the faithful Kodak look. Because in fact we are happy with that kind of huge highlight compression for digital camera. So that's a really like modern vibe of film look. The next look I'm going to show you is called Indie. Indie has a much more pastel palette with some very distinctive features. As you can see, Indie has a very pastel color palette. If you take a look at Modern Film Look right now, or at the Kodak one, it's much more vivid. And here is Indie. It's very pale. And one distinctive feature is that the yellows, instead of turning orange, turns to a greenish yellow. So it's very like a washed out yellow, as you can see here. That gives the skins a slightly greener tone with greater separation of color in the skin. You can see that on this one. You can see that beautiful color separation in the skin. And then in general, very pastel tones, very pale, unlike a more classic Kodak again. Indie has also a slightly softer contrast curve and a slightly cooler rendering, as you can see on this shot. As usual, Indie was designed to be relatively neutral in appearance, since it is often a better working base. If, of course, you want a cold, warm, or in any case, a more pronounced look, it's very easy to build it for yourself from this neutral base. All of our presets are designed like working base, and they are not too tinted. It's really the color volume rendering that is unique. But if you want something which is more tinted or with a huge color cast, it's very easy to build it yourself, in fact, from that look. In the skin, the highlights, as you can see, will turn like to yellow-green fairly quickly. And otherwise, you can see there is beautiful like redness and beautiful saturations. Indie will have a less vivid rendering than other film looks. Then I'm going to show you another look, which is called hybrid bleach. If it's called hybrid, in the same way as hybrid tone, it's because it borrows aesthetic feature from film, but retains a neutral axis without any dominant tones. You can see that here in this image, the gray patches are not tinted by the look, and the text, the structure of the window is not tinted either, and so on. So we have a look that doesn't tint the image and doesn't have a vintage or overly pronounced film look. Instead, it has a digital feel, and there's some bleach bypass component inside and some heavy saturation compression, as you can see on the 3D patches. Look at the blue, the red also. So it has a rather harsh look due to the fact that it cuts the saturation, and the bleach bypass tends to bring some contrast back. So it has like a contemporary metallic look. It can be great for a sci-fi movie, I don't know, something like that. Also because the neutral axis is not tinted, so it's quite a metallic and modern look. Those two looks, hybrid bleach and hybrid tone, are designed in the same way to borrow from film color compression, but with a well-preserved neutral axis. This is achieved thanks to saturation blending, which means that the color casts of the color tone curve module don't apply to values that are weakly saturated. So again, if you think about the looks within the last time, it's a very different proposition. If I switch to low-fi CineScan, for example, from that look, you can see how different it is. And that's nice because diachromy gives you access to that wide variety of looks, and that was our main goal developing that tool. And finally, the last look I'm going to talk about is called 2383 for ADX. It's not really intended for digital camera. It's a look that's intended for film scans. Let's have a look on this footage. If you color manage the film scan correctly in ACES with an IDT called ADX, let's color manage it in ACES. Okay, and here's the proper IDT. IDX 10 is for 10 bits scan, ADX 16 is for 16-bit scan. The 35mm scan appears developed, except that you can see that some colors are a little strange, green in particular, and the red is very bright too, because it wasn't printed on a film print. It's developed in contrast and saturation, but without having adopted the aesthetic characteristic of the film print. So the 2383 look for ADX is designed precisely to give a film scan developed in ACES with the appropriate IDT, of course, a look like a film correctly processed in a photochemical pipeline. This allows us to have a film workflow with all the characteristics of film in ACES, and therefore to take advantage of the possibility of having HDR outputs, but also SDR outputs, to have tools that are correctly color managed, such as color temperature or exposure, and simply mix film and digital in an ACES workflow while retaining the film look of a classic film pipeline. So it's very convenient because it can be used also for restoration, for restored film that need, for example, HDR outputs. Because you have to keep in mind that film print emulation are not made to provide HDR output. So it's a modern film print emulation. It's both HDR and SDR compliant. It's fully parametric, so you can customize it however you want. That's it for today's look. There is some others that you can discover for yourself. And thanks for watching.